A building is supposed to protect you from the outside world. But what happens when the building itself becomes the threat? Some of the structures on this list dropped massive glass panels onto sidewalks. Others were abandoned with people still living inside. And some showed clear signs of failure before collapsing with thousands of people trapped within them. These are 9 of the most dangerous buildings ever built. And by the time we reach number 1, the most terrifying part will not be that the building collapsed. It will be that people knew something was wrong before anyone went inside. Before we start, tell us which is more frightening to you: a building slowly falling apart or one that fails without warning. Number 9. The Sutyagin House, Russia. It began as a simple 2-story house. Then its owner kept building upward. And he did not stop until the wooden structure towered above the surrounding city like something from a nightmare. Imagine a narrow wooden tower rising above Arkhangelsk, Russia. For number 8, we traveled to Pyongyang, and a 105-story pyramid known by one unforgettable nickname. It rises more than 1,000 feet over Pyongyang. It has thousands of planned rooms, and for decades, almost nobody has stayed inside. They call it the Hotel of Doom. 3 enormous concrete wings rise toward a needle-like peak. The building dominates the skyline. At night, LEDs cover the exterior with giant glowing images. From outside, it can look futuristic. But behind the illuminated skin is a project that spent decades unfinished. Construction on the Ryugyong Hotel began in 1987. It was meant to be one of the greatest architectural statements in North Korea. A 105-story hotel with more than 3,000 rooms and revolving restaurants near the top. Then the country's economic crisis brought construction to a halt. By 1992, what remained was an enormous concrete shell. For years, images showed exposed concrete, unfinished openings, and a building that looked frozen in time. Outside observers questioned the quality and safety of the structure. Renovation of the exterior eventually began, and the tower received a modern glass facade. But much of the interior has remained incomplete or inaccessible. That makes the building especially strange. It looks finished from a distance, but appearance and usability are very different things. The Ryugyong Hotel became more than an unfinished construction project. It became a symbol, a monument to ambition interrupted by economic collapse. But an unfinished hotel is one thing. Imagine a skyscraper where thousands of people moved in even though basic systems were missing. That happened inside number 7. This tower was supposed to become a luxury financial center. Instead, it became an unfinished vertical city where thousands of people lived inside a skyscraper that was never meant to house them. A 45-story concrete tower rises over Caracas. Some areas have walls, others are exposed. Open edges overlook the city far below. There are no conventional elevators carrying residents comfortably to the upper floors. Instead, staircases stretch upward through unfinished concrete. Construction of Torre de David began in 1990. The project was intended to become a high-end financial complex with offices, a hotel, and luxury facilities. Then Venezuela's banking crisis stopped construction in the 1990s. The concrete frame survived, but many essential systems did not exist. No completed elevators, no finished plumbing, no normal residential infrastructure. Then, in 2007, people began moving in. Eventually, more than 3,000 residents reportedly occupied the unfinished building. Inside this incomplete tower, residents created their own community. There were small shops, barbers, even a gym. But the higher people climbed, the more dangerous conditions became. Some upper areas had no proper guardrails. Residents had to climb dozens of flights of stairs. Falls and injuries became part of the danger. At least one child was reported to have died after falling. Torre de David is terrifying because the people living there were not thrill seekers. Many were families seeking somewhere to live. They took an abandoned financial monument and turned it into housing because the alternative was worse. The Venezuelan government eventually relocated most residents by 2015. Torre de David shows what happens when a building is occupied before it is truly finished. But the next skyscraper was finished. and then pieces of it started falling onto the streets below. At number 6, one of America's sleekest glass towers became a danger to pedestrians. Imagine walking through downtown Boston and being told not to get too close to the tallest building in the city. Not because it might collapse, because its windows might fall on you. A 60-story wall of reflective blue glass rises over Boston. It is clean, minimal, elegant. Then hundreds of pounds of glass separate from the building and crash toward the street. The John Hancock Tower, now officially known as 200 Clarendon Street, became one of Boston's defining skyscrapers. But soon after completion, its signature glass facade developed a frightening problem. Large window panels began detaching. Each panel weighed hundreds of pounds. When they fell, sidewalks in areas around the tower became dangerous. During the 1970s, hundreds of panels reportedly failed. Officials closed off areas below. Police directed pedestrians away when conditions became dangerous. For a time, missing windows were replaced with plywood. The beautiful glass tower gained an embarrassing nickname, the Plywood Palace. Eventually, all 10,344 glass panels were replaced. The problems did not stop at the windows. Engineers also discovered that the building moved excessively in strong winds. Some occupants experienced motion sickness. To reduce the movement, enormous tuned mass dampers were installed near the top of the tower. Today, the building is considered safe, but its early years became a warning to architects everywhere. Falling glass is terrifying. But what happens when the danger starts hundreds of feet above ground and the only path to safety runs through a burning tower? That brings us to Moscow. Number 5. Ostankino Tower, Moscow. At more than 1,700 feet tall, Ostankino Tower was built to broadcast signals across Moscow. Then fire broke out high inside the structure, and firefighters could not simply reach it from the outside. The tower disappears upward into gray Moscow skies. Inside, narrow technical spaces are filled with cables and equipment. Then smoke begins climbing through the core. Electrical lines ignite. Flames move vertically through a structure hundreds of meters tall. People above the fire are suddenly isolated from the ground. Completed in 1967, Ostankino became one of the world's tallest freestanding structures. Its job was to carry television and radio signals across the Soviet capital. But on August 27, 2000, a major fire broke out inside the tower. The fire began high above ground and spread through electrical cabling inside the structure. The fire burned for hours. 3 people died, including firefighters and a technician. Moscow also lost significant television and radio transmission during the disaster. One of the greatest challenges was simple geometry. The fire was happening at a height where conventional firefighting equipment was of limited use. The incident exposed how different emergencies become inside extreme height structures. A normal building fire is already dangerous. Now place the same fire hundreds of meters above the street. Ostankino survived and later received improved safety systems. But the fire permanently changed how people looked at the tower. Fire attacks a building from the inside, but the next disaster came from the earth itself. And once the ground started moving, an entire apartment block had almost no chance. Number 4 takes us to Malaysia. Number 4. Highland Towers, Malaysia. The residents of Highland Towers lived beside a steep hillside. For years, that hill looked like part of the landscape. Then, in December 1993, it became the force that destroyed their home. 3 12-story apartment blocks stand beneath a green slope. Rain falls for days. The soil becomes saturated. Water builds where it should have drained away. Then a retaining wall fails. Mud and debris surge toward the buildings below. Highland Towers was a condominium complex in Selangor, Malaysia. On December 11, 1993, Block 1 collapsed. 48 people were killed. Investigations pointed to a combination of factors: heavy rainfall, poor drainage, weak retaining structures, and development on the surrounding hillside that had destabilized the area. The building did not fail because its residents overloaded it. It did not fail because of a fire. The entire environment around it had become dangerous. Once the landslide struck, the building's foundations were overwhelmed. Blocks 2 and 3 were later abandoned. For years, the empty towers remained standing near the site. The disaster changed how Malaysia approached hillside development. It forced officials, engineers, and developers to confront a simple truth. A building is only as safe as the ground supporting it. You can design walls, columns, roofs, but if the earth beneath everything becomes unstable, the entire structure can lose the fight. Highland towers collapsed after nature and poor planning combined. But our next building became dangerous for an entirely different reason. It did not simply fall apart. It slowly turned into a place people were afraid to enter. Number 3 is one of the most notorious residential towers in Africa. Number 3, Ponte City Apartments, South Africa. Ponte City was built as a futuristic symbol of luxury. Within 2 decades, parts of it had become so notorious that the tower developed a reputation as a vertical nightmare. A giant cylindrical skyscraper rises 54 stories above Johannesburg. At its center is a hollow core stretching from the base toward the sky. Apartments ring the outside. Long corridors wrap around the tower. And during its worst years, broken lights, failing elevators, trash, and darkness transformed parts of the building. Completed in 1975, Ponte City was originally intended for middle and upper-class residents. Its cylindrical design was meant to provide natural light and dramatic views. But Johannesburg changed rapidly during the political and social upheaval of the 1980s and 1990s. The neighborhood declined. Maintenance inside the tower deteriorated. Crime increased, and parts of Ponte City became severely neglected. At its worst, the building's hollow core reportedly accumulated more than 5 stories of debris. Elevators failed. Corridors went dark. Crime inside the building became a serious problem. The tower's reputation became so extreme that it was often described as a vertical slum. Imagine living dozens of floors above the city in a building where basic systems no longer feel dependable. That was everyday life for some residents. This is where Ponte City becomes more complicated than a horror story. People still live there. Families remained because moving elsewhere was not always possible. The tower was not just an abandoned ruin. It was someone's home. Later redevelopment improved large parts of the building, and significant portions became habitable again. That makes Ponte City a story of both decline and recovery. But its darkest years remain unforgettable. Ponte City became dangerous slowly. Our next building was different. People saw cracks. They knew the structure was in trouble, and yet the building stayed open. That decision would cost hundreds of lives. Number 2, Sampoong Department Store, South Korea. Number 2, Sampoong Department Store, South Korea. Hours before this building collapsed, there were warnings. Cracks were spreading, the roof was moving. People inside knew something was wrong, and the store remained open. It is June 29th, 1995. Hundreds of shoppers move through a luxury department store in Seoul. Above them, the structure is failing. Cracks widen near the upper floor. Heavy air conditioning equipment sits on the roof. Columns below have already been weakened by changes made during construction. Then the ceiling begins to give way. Seconds later, entire floors collapse onto one another. Sampoong Department Store had opened in 1990, but the structure had originally been designed for a different purpose. Plans were changed during construction. According to investigations described in the source, load-bearing columns were altered or cut to accommodate escalators. Heavy air conditioning units were installed on the roof. The building was being asked to carry loads it had not been properly designed to support. The terrifying part is what happened before the collapse. Cracks were visible. Staff noticed them widening. The danger was not completely hidden, but management did not immediately evacuate the entire building. Later that day, the south wing collapsed. 502 people were killed. More than 1,400 were injured. Rescue teams searched the debris for days. Some survivors were found after being trapped for extraordinary lengths of time. But the investigation turned the disaster into something even more disturbing. This was not simply an unpredictable freak event. The building had been weakened by human decisions, design changes, extra weight, ignored warning signs. The collapse became one of the clearest examples of what can happen when profit and convenience are allowed to overrule structural safety. Sampoong is almost impossible to imagine, but number one is even harder to accept. Because there, workers discovered cracks and left the building. Then many of them were ordered to return. What happened next became one of the deadliest structural failures in modern history. Number 1. Rana Plaza, Bangladesh. Number 1 is Rana Plaza, and what makes this building terrifying is not simply how many people died. It is the sequence of events before it happened. The danger announced itself. People saw it. People reacted to it. And the building was still filled again. It is April 23, 2013, in Savar, outside Dhaka. Workers notice cracks spreading through the walls of an 8-story commercial building. Concern moves through the structure. People leave. Some businesses close. For a moment, it seems like the warning has worked. Then the next morning arrives. Thousands of garment workers return. Machines begin operating. Floors vibrate. The building is already compromised. Then on April 24th, the structure gives way. Floor after floor collapses. Concrete slabs fall onto the levels below. Within moments, an ordinary workplace becomes a mountain of wreckage. Rana Plaza contained garment factories, shops, and a bank. Investigators later found serious construction problems. The building had reportedly been built with substandard materials. Additional floors had been added beyond the original design. The structure was carrying more than it should have been carrying. And garment factories introduced heavy machinery and vibration into a building already under severe stress. But those engineering failures alone do not explain why Rana Plaza became such a powerful symbol. The human decisions do. Cracks had appeared before the collapse. People knew something was wrong. Workers had already been evacuated. Yet factory employees were pressured to return. More than 1,100 people were killed. Over 2,500 were injured. It became one of the deadliest structural failures in modern history. The warning came first. Rana Plaza exposed something far bigger than one unsafe building. Suddenly, consumers thousands of miles away were forced to think about the buildings where their clothing had been made. The structure collapsed in Bangladesh. But the economic system connected to it extended around the world. Every building on this list tells us something different about danger. Wood pushed too high, a hotel left unfinished, a tower occupied without basic systems, glass falling from the sky, fire trapped inside extreme height, a hillside giving way, a luxury tower falling into neglect, a department store weakened by terrible decisions. But Rana Plaza leaves us with the darkest lesson of all. Sometimes the most dangerous building is not the one hiding its flaws. It is the one warning everyone in plain sight. And the people with the power to stop the disaster choose not to listen. Buildings are supposed to represent permanence. Concrete, steel, glass. Things designed to outlast the people who walk through them. But every structure depends on invisible decisions. Engineering, maintenance, regulation, and the willingness to act when something goes wrong. Ignore those decisions long enough, and even the strongest-looking building can become a trap. Which building on this list disturbed you the most? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe for more rankings exploring the world's strangest structures, darkest disasters, and places that seem almost impossible to exist, because some of the most frightening places on Earth are still standing.